Welcome to Watch Cozy. Before we start, if you could subscribe to our channel, we really do work hard finding these documents and, putting this together for you. Okay, so have you heard this story? It's about these North Korean soldiers.
Oh, the ones in Russia.
Yeah. Apparently they get internet access for the first time and, well, they went straight for pornography.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's quite a juxtaposition, isn't it?
Totally. From like complete digital isolation to that,
Yeah,
it just makes you think about the power those visuals have.
it really does. It sort of brings up all these questions about, what drives that immediate, intense interest, especially after being cut off for so long.
Right. It's almost like a concentrated version of forces maybe acting on all of us in this digital age.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where we're headed today, isn't it?
Exactly. We want to explore some of these ideas around, porn and masturbation, looking at it from a few angles like psychology, media effects.
Yeah, trying to understand a bit more about what might be going on under the surface, not making judgments, just exploring.
It's exactly. Just exploring the ideas.
And we've got some interesting viewpoints to draw from. We'll touch on Freud, his early ideas anyway.
Okay.
And there's a Psychology Today piece, some insights from Andrew Huberman, Jonathan Haidt, Rolf DeBelly too.
So a real mix of perspectives.
Yeah, hopefully it gives us a fuller picture.
Okay, so yeah, just to reiterate, no judgment here. We're just trying to unpack potential links between media, our emotional state, our focus.
Yeah.
Just following the threads from these sources.
Sounds good. So where should we start? Maybe that idea of media trying to keep us emotionally hooked?
Yeah, emotional servitude was the term used, right? It's pretty strong.
It is. It suggests a kind of deliberate effort to keep us engaged on that emotional level, maybe keep us coming back.
Right. The thinking being that media kind of thrives when we're emotionally plugged in, maybe even feeling a bit down or vulnerable.
The more feeling, the more consuming.
And there's this related argument, isn't there? That if people are feeling, say, low energy or unfocused, they make better consumers.
Yeah, like more passive, less likely to question things, more open to ads and suggestions.
Okay, so how does that connect to, say, all the images online? The sexualized stuff, the sort of hyper-idealized bodies.
Well, the sources suggest that a lot of this content, especially the slick professional stuff that's often free, it might be free for a reason.
You mean, we are the product, our attention.
Kind of. The idea is, by showing these often unrealistic standards constantly, maybe it makes us feel inadequate.
And that feeling pushes us to buy stuff, to try and bridge that gap.
That seems to be the argument. It lines up a bit with what Rolf DeBelly talks about, businesses using free stuff to get you in the door.
The reciprocity thing, like Robert Cialdini's work.
Exactly. You get something free, you feel a little obligated, maybe just to pay attention, or eventually, maybe buy something.
Okay, so bringing that back to easily accessible free porn.
The idea is that this constant, easy access to that pleasure hit, it can really mess with our brain's reward system, maybe.
Mess with it how? Like dysregulate dopamine.
Yeah, potentially. Leading us to chase those quick fixes instead of, things that might take more effort but be more rewarding long term. It's the ease of access that's key.
Gotcha. So it's the media creating the want, offering a super easy, free way to get a dopamine rush.
And maybe, unintentionally or not, contributing to a cycle, seeking instant gratification, relying on that easy pleasure.
Right. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. What about the bigger sort of social picture?
Well, that chat between Andrew Huberman and Jonathan Haidt was interesting. They talked about rising depression, particularly in Gen Z.
And they wondered about a link to porn use.
They raised it as a question, yeah. These trends are happening side by side. Can't say cause and effect for sure, but it's notable.
And what about the content itself? The nature of it?
There's a concern mentioned about increasingly maybe violent or multi-person scenarios becoming more normalized.
Potentially desensitizing people.
That's the worry, shifting the baseline of what seems normal or acceptable in sex.
And it's not just on porn sites, right? The source mentioned seeing similar themes, like infidelity, pop up more generally online.
Yeah, even places like Instagram. It sort of blurs the lines between fantasy and, real-life relationship norms.
That blurring, that shift in norms. Jonathan Haidt warned about that too, didn't he? Especially for young people.
He did. The concern about early exposure leading to a kind of premature, maybe decontextualized understanding of sex.
Without the emotional maturity or context.
Exactly. And if there aren't open conversations happening alongside that exposure,
Right.
It could lead to shame, right? Shame about your own body, your natural feelings.
And they made a point about the difference between shame and guilt. That feels important.
Super important. Guilt is about doing something wrong. Shame is feeling like you are wrong, fundamentally flawed.
And that deep shame, it can be really corrosive.
Mm.
Might push people towards escapism, substances, or maybe more porn.
Yeah, it can become a cycle. Feeling bad, seeking escape, maybe feeling worse afterwards.
Okay, let's pivot to the more psychological and physiological stuff. Freud came up.
Yeah, his early ideas. He actually saw masturbation as pretty normal, especially in childhood and adolescence.
Like a natural part of psychosexual development,
Mm.
exploring your body, finding pleasure.
Exactly, part of the process. But apparently, his view shifted a bit when it came to adults doing it frequently.
Oh, house.
He seemed to think it could indicate being kind of stuck, fixated at an earlier developmental stage, maybe linked to personality issues, something to explore in analysis.
Interesting. Okay, what about from a more modern, like, brain science view?
Well, the basic idea is that pleasurable experiences get learned really effectively. They get wired into our subconscious.
Which makes sense with porn, right? If it's easily accessible and provides pleasure.
It can start shaping preferences pretty quickly, maybe even automatically, and that could potentially create a disconnect with a real-life partner where intimacy is more complex.
Because the brain's reward system gets tuned to the easily available stimulus.
Right. Dopamine gets released, the brain learns, this is good, do it again. Repeat that often enough with easily accessible porn, and it might recalibrate expectations.
And there are hormonal effects too, right? Testosterone, cortisol.
Yeah, the sources mention impacts on testosterone, dopamine itself, obviously, cortisol, which is stress-related, even estrogen. It's a whole hormonal cascade.
And what about the physical act itself? There was a point about energy expenditure.
That masturbation typically uses less physical energy than partnered sex.
Okay.
So the idea presented was that this could lead to feeling mentally tired, but maybe still having physical desire, which might then encourage engaging more frequently.
Like the mind is tapped out, but the body isn't, creating a weird loop.
Sort of, yeah.
Right.
And that ties into willpower, too.
How so?
If the brain gets used to getting a reward with very little effort, the suggestion was this could weaken our resolve for harder tasks.
So we might avoid challenges and reach for the quick fix, like porn, especially when stressed.
Yeah, the analogy used was reaching for a cigarette. That immediate, easy hit of relief or pleasure when things get tough.
There was also a mention of nutrient deficiencies.
Yeah.
That seemed a bit less mainstream.
It was mentioned, yeah. Specifically regarding frequent masturbation in men, potentially impacting focus or memory due to nutrient loss. It's probably an area needing more research, but it highlights that habits can have unexpected physical links.
And then there's the societal stigma, even if someone feels okay about it personally.
Right. The awareness of that stigma can still trigger shame or guilt. And as we said, shame and guilt can increase cortisol, add to mental distress. It's a layer cake of factors.
And one last point on the physiological side, disrupting the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, the idea that constant, intense activation of the reward system might throw off our baseline regulation, potentially leading to more irritability, maybe erratic behavior.
Wow. Okay. So quite a lot of potential impacts discussed in these sources. What about managing it? Do they offer any strategies?
Yeah, a few things. Firstly, the idea that just stopping cold turkey might not be realistic or even helpful for everyone.
Okay, so not necessarily total abstinence.
Not necessarily as the only path. There was a suggestion to allow yourself pleasure, even if you're aware of downsides, but without the self-blame, because the guilt itself can hinder making changes.
Be mindful, not self-critical. Makes sense. What else?
Practical stuff like reducing environmental triggers, maybe unfollowing certain social media accounts if they lead you down paths you want to avoid.
Tidying up your digital environment.
Exactly. And then the big one, replacing the habit.
Like in Atomic Habits, don't just eliminate, substitute.
Precisely. Exercise was highlighted as a really good option. Gives you energy release, stress reduction, a positive alternative outlet.
Okay. And for listeners interested in more detail?
The source material mentioned a summary table was available on a Telegram channel, Power E Kalam. Apparently, the link was in the video description they referenced.
Gotcha. So we've covered a fair bit. Emotional hooks from media, social impacts, the psych and physical effects, ways to manage, all drawn from the material we looked at.
Yeah, quite a landscape.
Okay, so maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Given everything we've touched on about how media shapes desire and feelings, how consciously are you really navigating all that? Are you actively choosing what you consume or just sort of letting it wash over you.
And maybe building on that, knowing that pleasurable experiences literally rewire our brains. What kinds of experiences, online and offline, are you actively trying to cultivate? It's about being intentional, isn't it? Intentional about what shapes us.